The smell of smoke reaches her before the screaming stops. Matilda is 31 years old, queen of the northern reaches, wife of King Oswulf, mother of 3 children who are somewhere in the chaos outside these walls. She stands in the great hall of her burning palace, wearing a gown that was meant for a feast celebrating her husband's victory, watching through a shattered window as everything she has known collapses into ash and blood. The battle lasted 3 hours. It was supposed to last 3 days. Her husband's army, 3,000 men who had never lost a major engagement, who had held this coastline against raiders for a decade, broke in the first hour of fighting. Not because the Northmen outnumbered them, though they did. Not because the Northmen had better weapons, though in some ways they did. But because the Northmen fought with something Matilda's people did not have, a complete absence of the fear that makes men hesitate. She watched from the tower as her husband's cavalry charged and was swallowed. She watched the shield wall form and collapse. She watched Oswulf himself, recognizable by his golden armor, surrounded and pulled from his horse, like a stag brought down by wolves. What they did to him while he was still alive, she saw only fragments of through the smoke, enough to understand, enough to know that death came slowly when the Northmen wanted it to. Now, the great hall is filling with smoke, and the doors are shuddering under the impact of axes, and Matilda stands motionless in the center of the room because there is nowhere to go. The secret passage her husband had built for exactly this situation collapsed when the East Tower fell. The guards who were supposed to protect her are dead in the courtyard. The servants who might have helped her escape fled hours ago. She is alone, unarmed, and wearing a crown that marks her as exactly what the men outside are looking for. The doors splinter. Through the gap she sees faces painted with symbols she does not recognize, eyes that reflect firelight with an intensity that seems inhuman. The first Northman through the door is enormous, half a head taller than any man in her husband's guard, his beard braided with silver rings that catch the light as he moves. He stops when he sees her. His eyes travel from her face to her crown to the rings on her fingers, assessing not her beauty or her terror, but her value. She is not a woman to him. She is a prize, a commodity, a symbol of victory that will be displayed and used and eventually disposed of according to customs she has heard whispered about but never fully believed. Behind him, more men pour into the hall. They do not touch her, not yet. They wait for the large man to speak, to claim, to decide. The hierarchy is clear even through her shock. This man commands, the others follow, and her fate depends entirely on what he determines she is worth. He speaks in a language she does not understand, harsh consonants and rolling vowels that sound like stones grinding together. The men around him laugh at whatever he said. One of them responds, gesturing at her crown. Another makes a motion she cannot interpret, but that makes the others laugh harder. The large man silences them with a look. He approaches her slowly, the way a hunter approaches a trapped animal, confident but alert for unexpected movement. He stops 3 feet away and studies her face with an attention that is somehow worse than violence would be. Drottning, he says. The word is unfamiliar, but its meaning is clear from context. Queen. He reaches out and removes the crown from her head. His hands are surprisingly gentle, almost ceremonial, as if the removal is a ritual rather than a theft. He examines the crown briefly, weighing it, assessing the gold and gems, then hands it to one of his men without looking. Then, he looks at her again, and his expression changes. Something shifts behind his eyes, some calculation completing, some decision being made. Frey ha gefur, he says. Whatever it means, it makes the men around him grow quiet. They look at her differently now, with something that might be fear, or might be reverence, or might be anticipation of something she cannot imagine. The large man takes her arm, his grip firm but not painful, and leads her out of the burning hall into a night lit by the flames of her kingdom's destruction. Around her, she sees women being dragged from buildings, children being sorted into groups, men being executed or bound depending on criteria she cannot determine. She sees her husband's body, or what remains of it, displayed on a pole near the main gate. She does not scream. She does not fight. She has watched enough of this night to understand that screaming and fighting accomplish nothing except hastening whatever comes next. She allows herself to be led toward the harbor, where ships with dragon prows wait in water that reflects fire like liquid metal. She walks past the corpses of everyone she has ever known into a future that exists beyond anything her experience has prepared her for. She is a queen. She will learn what that means to the men who have taken her. She will learn what Vikings really did to captured royalty. And she will wish, many times in the months to come, that she had found a way to die in that burning hall. What you are about to learn has been systematically softened by centuries of scholarship that preferred to focus on Viking exploration and trade rather than Viking conquest and consumption. The sagas that survived were written by descendants who wanted their ancestors remembered as adventurers rather than predators. The archaeological evidence that tells a different story has been interpreted through frameworks designed to minimize what it actually reveals. Tonight, you will learn what the Norse sources themselves document about the treatment of captured royalty, not the sanitized versions that appear in children's books about fierce but honorable warriors. The actual practices, recorded in their own words, preserved in texts that scholars have traditionally translated with strategic omissions. You will learn about the ritual significance of royal captives, why queens and princesses were valued differently than common prisoners, what specific ceremonies awaited women of noble blood. You will learn about the thrall system that reduced human beings to categories of property, and the special category that existed for captives whose status made them useful for purposes beyond labor. You will learn about the blot, the sacred rituals that required specific types of offerings, and why royal women sometimes fulfilled requirements that animal sacrifice could not satisfy. You will learn about the practice of gifting high-status captives to gods, to jarls, to warriors who had distinguished themselves in battle. You will learn what the skalds meant when they sang of bed slaves of noble blood, what the laws meant when they specified different rules for thralls of royal origin, what the archaeological evidence of female remains in elite Viking graves actually indicates about the women buried there. You will learn why some captured queens were kept alive for decades, while others disappeared within days, and what determined which fate a woman received. You will learn about the children born from these arrangements, the bloodlines that merged conqueror and conquered in ways that the official histories preferred not to examine. Subscribe if you want to understand the reality behind the mythology. Comment below telling me where you are watching from. Because Matilda is being led to a ship right now, her arms still gripped by the man who claimed her, her future being determined by calculations she does not understand. And I am going to tell you exactly what happened to her. But before I reveal what the Vikings did to captured queens, before I explain the system that had been refined over centuries to extract specific value from royal women, I need to take you back. I need to show you how Viking society actually functioned, why they valued certain captives above all others, and what their own sources reveal about the fate of noble women who fell into their hands. Because you cannot understand what happened to Matilda without understanding the men who took her and the culture that shaped them. The Vikings were not a unified people or a single culture. They were a collection of Scandinavian societies, Norse, Danes, Swedes, who shared language, religion, and certain fundamental assumptions about how the world worked. Among these assumptions was one that shaped everything they did, the belief that the universe was governed by fate, that outcomes were determined by forces beyond human control, and that the only appropriate response to this cosmic indifference was to seize what you could while you could seize it. This worldview produced the raids that terrorized coastal Europe for 3 centuries. It also produced a social system designed to process the wealth those raids generated, including the human wealth that often proved most valuable of all. The thrall system was slavery, but slavery with characteristics specific to Norse culture. Thralls were property, owned completely by their masters, with no rights that their owners were obligated to respect. They could be bought, sold, gifted, punished, used, and disposed of according to owner preference. The children of thralls were born into thralldom regardless of paternity, creating a hereditary servant class that expanded with each generation. But within this system, distinctions existed that made certain thralls far more valuable than others. The Norse recognized that captives brought different qualities depending on their origins. A peasant farmer, taken during a raid, might be strong enough for agricultural labor, but lacked the education, refinement, and prestige that certain household functions required. A noble woman, however, brought capabilities that common captives did not possess: literacy, cultural knowledge, social graces, the ability to manage complex households, and something else that the Norse valued perhaps above all: status. Viking society was intensely hierarchical, with status determining everything from seating arrangements at feasts to the quality of burial goods that accompanied the dead to the afterlife. Wealth was a component of status, but not its totality. What truly elevated a man in Norse society was reputation, demonstrated excellence, visible proof of worth that others could observe and acknowledge. And nothing demonstrated worth more clearly than possessing what others could not obtain. A jarl who owned a captured queen possessed something that his rivals did not. Every time she appeared in his hall, every time she served at his feasts, every time she was displayed before visitors, she advertised his power, his success, his superiority over the men whose kingdoms had provided such prizes. She was a living trophy, a permanent reminder of victories won, a status symbol that never depreciated because her value